How would you respond to criticism from your opponent, particularly in calling you a pastor?
Sure, I know who I am, and so does my community in front of me. They can see through these kinds of attacks, and it's not just insulting, to me as a person of faith, but it's insulting to all Christians and pastors who do this work in our state and around the country. So it's disappointing to see that kind of attack.
Josh Turk on the campaign trail talks about banning stock trading and some other
Yes.
reforms for Congress, whereas you
Yes.
talk more generally about steps that Congress should take, maybe raise the minimum wage. I haven't heard you say that today,
Yes.
but why take that tack instead of focusing on reforms of Congress?
Well, let me tell you, I'm going to just speak to both of those because I really appreciate that question. So, I feel really proud to be endorsed by the largest anti-corruption organization in the country, which is called End Citizens United. So I have pledged to not accept corporate PAC dollars in my campaign. I have pledged to go and fight to ban legislator stock trading in Congress, to ban the legislator to lobbyist pipeline, and to do everything that I can to overturn Citizens United. I will tell you, one of my first weeks in the Iowa legislature, when Medicaid had been privatized, this was way back when, it had been privatized, and a neighbor of mine lost vital healthcare services. I went and told his story on the floor of the Iowa legislature, and I called out Amerigroup, the very company that was denying him healthcare. And shortly after I finished my speech, the Amerigroup lobbyist requested to speak with me, and I am someone who will speak with anyone and work with anyone who will work with me. And I am, and so I went out to speak with him, and let me tell you how that conversation went. So I'm a new legislator, so just picture this. The first thing that he said to me is, Representative James, I know that you're new here. We just don't do that in the Iowa legislature. We don't call out a company by name on the floor. My response, I don't care what the norms of the Iowa legislature are. I care that my neighbor gets the health care that he needs. That conversation ended abruptly, and so I was surprised when the very next day he reached out to me again. And this time the tone was different. He actually said, Representative James, I had a conversation with my employer last night. We've decided to reverse the decisions that we've made regarding your neighbor and restore the healthcare services that we previously denied. That is a picture of how outsized the voice of lobbyists, the ultra wealthy, and greedy corporations have in our policy-making places. It is time to send someone with a moral compass and the courage of conviction to fight against that corruption. And that is the kind of person that I am and the kind of legislator I will be in Washington, D.C., because there is too much at stake not to say what needs to be said. So that was the corruption piece. Let's talk about economic realities. I shared in my speech that there are too many people making impossible choices because of the cost of living crisis that we're facing, whether that's cost of gasoline, groceries, whether that's the cost of a young family trying to buy into the housing market or being able to afford childcare. These kinds of cost of living crisis is causing folks all across our state to make impossible choices. It's a mom who is choosing, do I pay my utility bill or buy my daughter a winter coat? These are impossible choices that are happening in the wealthiest country in the world, and I would argue that that is not right. And so again, the economic realities of everyday hardworking families need to be addressed. So I will be focusing on lowering costs for families, everyday families. When it comes to the cost of healthcare, there's a number of policies that we can put into place that can actually make a real impact. We can reverse the ACA cuts and get an infusion of resources back into our rural healthcare systems. We can do accountability and transparency work when it comes to our pharmaceutical costs and industries. We can do permitting reform to make it so that houses are more affordable and actually are able to be built in a more expedited way so that we can meet the housing needs of this moment. There are policies that we can put into place that will change the realities of everyday working families here in our state. But again, you're going to need someone with courage of conviction who's willing to take on the corruption in Washington, D.C. and have this fight. My opponent, Joe Mitchell, is the epitome of corruption. He is someone who is a state legislator turned lobbyist. He is someone who has used used his power and position in the government to further enrich himself and his own businesses. And so that is something that people are tired of. They don't want to see more ultra wealthy people in Congress benefiting from their work in Congress. What people are longing for is someone with courage of conviction to go do right by their neighbors. When it comes to my faith, caring for my neighbor is not optional.
Can I follow up on that? Because Joe Mitchell was here and he said he was never a registered lobbyist. He formed the Iowa Real Estate Developers Association and they hired lobbyists. So what's your basis for saying that he became a lobbyist?
He founded the lobbying firm, which I would argue is him being a lobbyist, and he used his power and authority and position to advocate for policies that would benefit him financially. And so I would argue again that he is misleading folks when he is talking about who he is. People want someone with a moral compass. That is not Joe Mitchell.
Are you talking about the housing tax credits or what policies to enrich himself?
Yes, housing
Okay.
tax credits as one of those as well. He has benefited from those personally, and he has benefited from advocating for policies and passing policies in Washington D.C. through HUD that has benefited him in his work here in the state as well. So again, people are tired of ultra wealthy individuals who are in this to fight for themselves. I am here to fight for everyday hardworking families.
Can you talk about which of those HUD policies you're referencing?
Can you say that again?
Can you talk about which HUD policies you're referencing?
Sure. So in that role, he had the authority to give developers contracts in our state, and he gave himself contracts to the tune of $2.5 million. So again, further enriching his own business through his position in the government.
You can go.
Joe Mitchell said he'd like to see the U.S. finish the job in Iran. Do you think continuing the U.S. mission is in the country's best interest?
So one of the things that we know is that the foreign policy decisions of this administration have been reckless. They have harmed Iowans. Not only have we lost Iowans' lives in our state, we have also seen exponential costs go up directly because of the war, the cost of fertilizer and gasoline, in particular with our farmers. My argument is, as someone who is a person of faith, as someone who believes in diplomatic levers and doing everything we can to engage conversations to bring people together across difference, I would like to see the billions of dollars that's being spent on an endless war with no plan, with no final deadline, to be brought back to America and to the U.S. because my neighbors can't afford their prescription medications.
Would you say you're against the U.S. mission then?
Say that again.
Would you say you're against the U.S. mission in Iran?
I would say that we need accountability for sure when there's nuclear weapons involved, and so that has been well established that is no longer a threat. The war needs to be ended, and we need to bring our soldiers home, and we need to bring our resources back to the United States.
That was my question. So. That's still nice.
Sorry, I want to go back to HUD. You're talking about during that brief period when Joe Mitchell was the HUD regional administrator,
Yes.
and you're saying that he himself gave his company contracts?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Happy to kind of talk
Okay, yes.
through exactly and give you the reference points as well. So we'll have to offline about that.
Okay.
Do you support an increase in the minimum wage?
Thank you for coming back to that. I support an increase in the minimum wage. I think one of the things that we're seeing at 48th in the country when it comes to wages, and wages are stagnant. Families are working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they're doing that while the ultra wealthy are continuing to earn more and get more in their pockets. And so I am someone who is, all of my policies are going to be with my neighbors in mind, with hardworking Iowans in mind, and making sure that no one ever has to make an impossible choice.
So, some of our neighbors here have raised the minimum wage to as high as $15. Is that the level at which you think the national minimum wage?
I haven't really gotten into the exact level of that yet, but these are conversations that, again, we need people with courage of conviction to go say what needs to be said and fight for these things, and I am that person. Joe Mitchell will fight for himself. I am going to fight for everyday hardworking families in our state.
If you were elected, what committees would you seek to serve on?
My first and foremost is the Ag Committee. So I'm very excited to show up for our farmers, work with our farmers, make sure that our farmers are not making impossible choices. And it's been way too long. It's time for a farm bill, one that actually meets the moment and meets the needs of our farmers.
So would you have voted for the farm bill that was up for a vote in the House?
I, you know, thank you for that question. It's a really good question. I haven't spent a whole lot of time really diving into that policy in particular. So I will give you a more comprehensive answer on that here soon. But one of the things that I know it's not doing is actually meeting the moment for our farmers. Too many farmers are telling me that they're making impossible choices when it comes to their input costs, cost of fertilizer, cost of gasoline, cost to make their operations work. And this is too important of a challenge in front of us not to have folks who are really passionate about making sure we're doing right by our farmers.
Just had a question. So when you're running in a competitive district, like what do these next 75 days look like for you to close that gap?
Yes, I am really proud to be the only candidate in this race who's holding public forums in every county in this district. For me, this is about public transparency, accountability, and I want everyone to know that I'm going to do everything that I can to listen to them and make decisions based on what they tell me so that I can do right by them. So holding these public forums have been an incredible gift. Connecting with and meeting people from across the political spectrum has been really informative, and everywhere I go, I tell people, for me, when it comes to my faith, showing up for my neighbor, caring for my neighbor, doing right by my neighbor is not optional. And I'm going to do that in every way possible when I am here at home and